Israel has pressed ahead with its devastating offensive against Gaza's Hamas rulers, which could go on for weeks or months. On Monday, the Israeli army issued another announcement asking residents of northern Gaza to evacuate south, with more than 90% of Gaza's 2.3 million residents being displaced within the besieged territory.
The death and destruction that has largely impacted Palestinian women and children, mostly civilians, in the Gaza Strip at the hands of the Israeli Defense Forces has become so extreme that President Joe Biden briefly had a moment of clarity and called out the indiscriminate bombing that is currently taking place because of this ongoing war, because of Israel refusing to engage in a ceasefire or really take measures necessary to ensure that civilians are being protected. So here's a little bit of Biden's criticism, but don't get too excited because he did in fact walk it back.
Israel's military campaign is now sparking tensions with the White House. President Biden speaking earlier at a fundraiser today, saying Israel is right to take on Hamas and has most of the world supporting them. But they're starting to lose that support by indiscriminate bombing in Gaza. And that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government has to change. You can't say there's no Palestinian state in the future. The administration wants the more moderate Palestinian Authority to take over post-war Gaza. But Netanyahu is rejecting that, saying overnight, I will not allow the entry into Gaza of those who educate for terrorism, support terrorism, and finance terrorism. Today, 6 aid groups said the humanitarian situation in Gaza is in an apocalyptic freefall.
An apocalyptic freefall that has been going on for months now. And I just want to let you know that when this story broke yesterday, the statements that Joe Biden made in a closed door private fundraiser, I wasn't willing to give him any credit because I felt that, he does this time to time where he wants to have his cake and eat it too. Where he on one hand will say, we're urging the Israelis to be careful and to avoid civilian casualties, while also making an appeal to Congress, applying pressure to Congress to approve another $14 billion in military weaponry and military support to Israel. You can't on one hand criticize what Israel is doing, and then on the other hand, through your actions, support what they're doing. And that's essentially what he has been engaging in. Biden has been supporting them both rhetorically, but also through these military support efforts. With that said, of course, members of the Biden administration immediately walked back Biden's statements today. In the Financial Times, there was a report in which one US official said that Biden's remarks were not part of an orchestrated attempt by the White House to put pressure on Netanyahu, but were off the cuff and random. In other words, don't worry, Netanyahu, we're not actually going to apply pressure or deny you any military support as you continue to slaughter innocent women and children in the Gaza Strip. Don't worry, we still have your back, even when you are publicly saying that you will go against our policies and what we wish if that were in fact our official policies toward Israel, right? So one thing that's become abundantly clear in recent days is that Israel has absolutely no interest in allowing for a Palestinian state. They're saying it out loud in interviews. Benjamin Netanyahu has made that abundantly clear. And the war now is, I want to give you the death toll, the casualties, because every day the numbers keep rising. Every day the apocalyptic situation gets worse. The war, now in its 3rd month, has brought unprecedented death and destruction, with much of northern Gaza obliterated. More than 18,000 Palestinians killed, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. 70% of them reportedly children and women, and over 80% of the population of 2.3 million pushed from their homes, meaning displaced from their homes. And I want you to just for a second put yourself in the shoes of these Palestinians, knowing that their homes are completely destroyed. Think about how comforting it is to be in your own home, to come home after work and be in your own little bubble, your own little refuge, your own little safe space. That is what's currently being denied to these Palestinian civilians. The conditions in the northern half of the Strip are unlivable. And I believe that that is very much intentional, especially given the public statements that members of the Likud party have been making recently about how they will not allow for a Palestinian state. Now, those numbers that I just shared with you do not include the bodies that are currently trapped underneath the rubble. The rubble that was the result of buildings that were bombed by the 2,000-pound bombs that the United States has been supplying Israel with. So Euromed Monitor actually does their own count of civilian casualties. And what they do is they also include the number of people who are very likely dead because they were trapped under the rubble and no one was able to retrieve their bodies, because remember, the Gaza Strip has also run out of fuel, which means the heavy machinery that they usually rely on to dig through that rubble is inoperable. They can't use it because they don't have the fuel to run those machines. Now, Euromed Monitor said that 23,012 Palestinians have been killed so far in the intense Israeli air and artillery attacks on the Gaza Strip, including 9,077 children, as hundreds of additional children remain trapped under the rubble of destroyed buildings with little chance of survival. The total number of children deaths is likely to exceed 10,000. And how can your heart not break when you read numbers like that, when you see the kinds of videos that we've been seeing day in and day out? This is why I have a hard time believing that social media, that algorithmic manipulation on TikTok is what's turning certain Americans against supporting Israel's effort in Gaza. We see these videos and it makes us sick to our stomachs. I would feel the exact same way if it was happening to Israeli civilians. But it's not happening to Israeli civilians. It's happening to Palestinian civilians, and it's wrong. And hearing from the White House here and there about how maybe they should do a little more to mitigate civilian casualties, it's just not enough. Actions speak louder than words, and we haven't really seen much action from the White House in regard to protecting civilian lives. Now, according to Euromed Monitor, they note other figures, including the fact that 700,000 children have been affected by Israel's, what Israel is currently doing with the bombardments, with the artillery fire. And that number also includes those who were killed, injured, and internally displaced. Euromed Monitor further estimated that between 24,000 and 25,000 children in the Gaza Strip have lost one or more parent. And approximately 640,000 have had their homes destroyed or damaged, leaving them without a place to live. There was a video I was watching today. It was an international news organization, and it featured a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6 or 7 years old. Both of her parents are gone. She's an orphan now. She was receiving what little medical treatment they can provide right now in the Gaza Strip. And my heart just broke for this little girl to lose both of her parents. I don't know what her fate will be. It's just absolutely devastating. Now, what Israel is planning to do is flood the tunnels in the Gaza Strip. The IDF is now flooding Gaza's tunnels in some, what they're saying, limited regions of the Strip. I wouldn't take anything that either Hamas or the IDF say at face value. I would take anything either side says with a grain of salt until we have a third party that's a little more fair, kind of looking into and analyzing the situation clearly. But they have been thinking about flooding those tunnels for quite some time. At first, I was under the assumption that that would be a good way to get Hamas militants out, because I'm under the assumption that they're hiding in the tunnels. But there are some complications here. Number one, remember, there are still Israeli hostages and other hostages in the Gaza Strip. They're very likely in those tunnels. And the reason why I say they're likely in those tunnels is because the hostages that have since been freed have said that they were kept in the tunnels. So flooding the tunnels with seawater, obviously, very obviously, puts the lives of those hostages in jeopardy. There's also some concern that flooding those tunnels with seawater would contaminate whatever's left of the drinking water in Gaza. So there are certainly some complications and some issues there. And the situation is about to get a whole lot worse as the IDF prepares to do this, because remember, they're not just gonna flood the tunnels and be done with it. They're also continuing on with their aerial bombardments. They're pushing Gazans further and further to the southern border, the Rafah border, and there have been reports that they are in fact trying to push them out into Egypt, but Egypt refuses to open its borders specifically to avoid Palestinians being pushed out of their land, and giving the Israeli government what it wants in pushing Palestinians out of their land.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.